Joined by George Papaconstantinou. He was the finance minister of Greece between 2009 to 2011, really in the eye of the storm. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Bloomberg. It was very interesting in the panel that we just had. You were saying that the choice now is not to actually leave the euro in an orderly fashion, because any choice to leave the euro for Greece would result in a disorderly exit.
There is no such thing as an orderly exit, and I think people tend to underestimate the costs of any exit, both for Greece and for the rest of the Eurozone. For Greece, it would lead to a halving of incomes, inflation at 30–40%, GDP falling another 20%, and for the rest of the Eurozone, it would create a contagion effect. I do not for a moment believe that we can somehow think that there's walls that contain the effect of other countries. You would have an immediate impact on the banking systems of other countries. So I think we need to preserve the basic tenet of irreversibility of the euro. If we let one country slip, then the whole construct will be in jeopardy.
Essentially, on June the 17th, it's a vote on whether to stay in the euro or whether not to stay in the euro. Is it right, that assumption, and how do you convince the Greek people to stay in the euro? Because if what you say is right, then the consequences of leaving the euro would be catastrophic.
Actually, 8 out of 10 Greeks, more than that even, want to stay in the euro. There is, however, a contradiction between that percentage and the percentage of people who actually reject the existing agreement. And we somehow need to marry the two and find the right compromise. So the choice on the 17th is between a coalition that is pro-European, reform-minded, wants to honor our commitments but also change them in order to improve the situation for Greek citizens who have been going through a lot, or a solution that will, whatever they say, take us eventually out of the Eurozone. I think that's a very stark choice that people have to make.
But if Greece does stay in the Eurozone, it's still going to be very painful, and we will be possibly in this limbo state. We don't know whether the Eurozone exists. We don't know what will happen to Spanish and Italian yields over the next year to 2 years. What needs to happen from the politicians or from the policymakers to try and give the help that the European needs to get rid of this fear that we're seeing on the markets?
Well, since the beginning of this crisis, we've been arguing that it's not just an issue of Greece. Greece needs to do a number of things to put its fiscal house in order, do structural reforms, get growth going again. But it's a broader systemic issue. And I think a lot has happened in these last 2 years to address some of the weaknesses that we all knew existed in the Eurozone. Basically, that you have a common monetary policy, but not a common economic fiscal policy. And I think having gone half the distance, we now need to do some more courageous things. We have a fiscal compact. We need to be more courageous about growth, and finally this growth initiative needs to take place. We need to talk about a common European banking sector that involves initiatives in the direction of what the European Commission has been saying. European guarantee, for example, deposits. We need to move towards Eurobonds. The discussion is finally on the table. And finally, we need to understand that we have to move to closer political union, which is, of course, the hardest part of the whole thing.
How crucial are Eurobonds? How important is it that Germany softens their stance a little bit? Or is it actually Eurobonds are just the end game to more fiscal consolidation?
Some degree of mutualization of debt will be absolutely necessary for the Eurozone to survive intact. However, it is clear to everybody that this goes hand in hand with the rules for fiscal consolidation applying in all countries. We don't understand this. That needs to be on the table, just to convince certain countries, namely Germany, to move in that direction. But I think we're already getting there. We have some of the tools, the FSF, the new mechanism. We have a European Central Bank which is a completely different animal today than when it was 2 years ago, without actually admitting it. It is changing its role. It needs to change even more, in my view. It needs to be more proactive. We need to think about a bit of a fiscal stimulus in the countries that can afford it, and that's certainly not the countries in the south, but it is some of the countries in the north, to create an environment so we can all get out of the crisis by growing, because without growth, we're nowhere. Austerity by itself Austerity maybe, fiscal consolidation is absolutely necessary, but it's not enough.
Do you regret having signed your country onto these austerity measures? I know you personally have been receiving a lot of flack from people that recognize you in the street. You were saying how difficult it was sometimes to just simply go to a cafe and order a coffee for you and your family.
Look, it's much more difficult for somebody whose salary has been cut 30–40%, who's seen their taxes go up. It's much more difficult for a young Greek unemployed person. 1 in 2 cannot get a job at the moment than it is for us politicians. We had to take difficult decisions, and it is difficult for us in everyday life, but that's part of the job. What can I say?
But the mood is one of severity in Greece at the moment?
The mood is one of anger and disillusionment, and I think it needs to be addressed, because part of what we're saying to our European partners right now is that we've done a lot in these last 2 years. Reducing the deficit by the primary deficit by 8 percentage points has never been done anywhere in 2 years like we did. Structural reforms have started that were not done in the last 20 or 30 years. Not everything has been done, and we've made mistakes, and we were late in certain things. However, it is beyond us at the moment. We're in the 5th year of recession. Something's got to give, and at the moment, what is happening is that the current environment is feeding the extremes, and that's very dangerous, not just for Greece, because we see the same thing happening in other countries in Europe.
All right, Mr. Papaconstantinou, thank you so much for your time.